I'm gonna sit right here. Right here. Hey everybody, it's Mother with the good dog. Never mind about Sean, I'm taking over the motherfucking show. Say hi.
Hey everybody, it's Sean with the Good Dog, and it's Q&A Saturday, episode number 152. I think we got it.
Yep.
It's been a million years since we've done an episode, so we're super excited to try and bring one back to you. God only knows how it's going to go. It's going to be rusty. It's going to be a little bit disorganized. It's going to be a little fly by night, but we will pull through and see what we come up with. Hopefully you can hear us with the air conditioner. Marta promises me that the air conditioner is not too loud, right? Mm-hmm. So hopefully you guys are okay. If the air conditioner is too loud, then please send all emails to Marta and let her know that you're very disgruntled and upset. So
Sure.
Here's the plan, guys. I mean, what's it been? 3 months since we've done one of these? 4 months?
God, I don't know.
It's been a really long time. So we used to do Q&A Saturdays every week back in the day, and then we tried to bring it back and do it like once a week, once every 2 weeks, then once a month, and then
once every 4 months.
yeah, and then it got stretched. And so we're trying to bring it back, and one of the biggest problems is that we both travel a lot, right? So you're going to school and you're traveling, and I'm traveling and doing
And going to school.
Well, yes, and doing workshops and creating products and doing things and working with the team and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it's a bit challenging to try and put this together, but we can have a million excuses for you, and that's really just a bunch. It's just a million excuses. So let's try and jump into the show and see how we do. We've had a couple glasses of wine to try and take the edge. Oh, I can talk more quietly now.
Yes, you don't have
The air
to
conditioning's
scream.
gone, right? So we've had a couple glasses of wine. We've got cookies on the way. We've had some, I had some pad thai. You had some
Dirty noodles.
dirty noodles. And so we're all set as far as food's good. We're just waiting. The cookies could knock at any moment. Well, they won't knock on their own. But,
Well, who knows if they do?
unless they're really super
super cookies.
Yeah, what's the word I'm looking for?
Self-sufficient.
Reliant.
Reliant.
No, come on, feed me.
I don't know anymore.
Hold on.
Alive.
Self-realized. Ooh.
Say
They're
a word.
I'm a cookie, and I'm going to knock on your goddamn door, and I'll come in when I want to come in.
I don't think it's a word.
Oh, yeah, it is. Anyways, if it's not, So, gang, it's late night.
As always.
It's 5 after 11 p.m. Central Standard Time, right?
It's actually 3 past, but that's okay.
Okay. I always set my watch a little early because I tend to be a little not early. So we've trained all the dogs, right? Starting at 6 in the morning with explosive diarrhea. So for anybody,
It's been fun. It's been a fun day.
Yeah, just let me share with folks that might be under the misperception that, hey, Sean the good dog, he just kind of rolls around, makes sure the team's looking good, then maybe drives in, jumps in his car and drives around, has a good time. Yeah. I was up battling whining, barking, bratty dogs. And not that they're bad, they're just whiny, barky, bratty dogs. And then explosive diarrhea that
Covering the walls.
shot all over the walls. And I was sitting on the couch out here in the kennels in the other room, and I was sitting on the couch, and I was like, okay, you can study, you can do your thing. It's like the whining's going on, the whining, a little bit of barking. So I'm correcting dogs. I'm putting e-collars on dogs that I think are the usual suspects. But what I don't do is I don't take the one dog out who is the one who's got the issue. And so sure enough, she blows a gasket and totally annihilates the room. There's diarrhea in her water bowl. It's everywhere. And so I spent a good part of the morning cleaning up diarrhea in my like mandals, with my socks on. And
those are jandals.
No, I call them mandals.
They're jandals.
Okay, well, we can agree to disagree. And so went out, then we had to clean out the crate and do the whole deal. And I was like literally yelling up to you because I know you were still sleeping. I was like, Marta, get down there. Get down there.
To wake me up, that's for sure.
And you know what happens every step you take down the staircase, you're like,
I smelled it the moment I woke up.
Okay.
And I was like,
but as you get down further down the stairs, you're like, oh God, this isn't good. Yeah. So anyways, so lest anyone think that it's just a glamorous life of just kind of doing my own thing and writing up some posts and it's all, a gravy train. Reality is I'm out. We walked
down the
three sets of dogs today. You did most of the training today. I did training late last night to about 1 a.m, and still cleaning up poop and spraying down diarrhea encrusted crates and all that good stuff. So that's just to make sure we keep ourselves in perspective so no one thinks that like I'm a fancy pants or anything like that, because I'm a long ways from fancy pants. The day that I can just pick up like the bat phone and be like, by the way, I think there's diarrhea downstairs, and then like a whole team rushes, that'd be great. Anyways, so you look highly annoyed.
No, I was just gonna say this is really sour.
Oh.
So I'm having the like lemon face.
Are you having the lemon face? Okay.
I was just gonna say, and with that, let's jump into question number 1. Ready for question number 1?
Yes.
Okay. Question number 1 is from Sarah. I would assume you say it Krieger. I would say Krieger.
Krieger.
It looks very much like a German last name.
Okay.
So we go with that.
Okay.
Our rescue puppy, 8 months old, lived with 18 other puppies and dogs until 4 months when she was rescued. The foster has another dog, and we have another dog. She gets along with every dog she has met and attends supervised daytime socialization with numerous dogs.
Okay.
When we walk or are on the porch and she sees another dog, she will begin with a whine or growl and progress to a bark depending on the size and response of the other dog.
Mm-hmm.
All the while her tail is wagging and she seems relaxed and not on guard physically. I have tried a simple and firm verbal correction while on our porch, same or a quick correction with the leash, haul on walks, and I have also tried having her lie in place and treating her with a command of quiet in a location where dogs pass frequently. She responds well to other dogs when approached on leash. This is just when they are not accessible. The barking drives me nuts and obviously makes walks no fun. Help.
Okay, so the theme that I see through most of that, except for one little moment of like a leash correction, but my guess is that it's a leash correction on like a flat buckle collar or something like that, is that there's a lot of verbal corrections, consequences.
Communication.
Yeah, right. So it's like, no, don't do that. No, I don't like this. The reality is, whether it's this situation or your situation, whatever it might be, if you've got a dog engaging in a behavior that you don't like, and all you're doing is leveraging verbal consequences, and I will say for very, very, very soft dogs, verbal consequences, which are like no and a little eye contact, could be enough. But that's a very small percentage. Almost every other dog is going to need a verbal marker, no, and then a physical consequence that lets the dog know the thing you were just doing, I don't want any more of, right? So whether that's done with a bonker, whether that's done with a leash and prong, whether that's done with an e-collar, which is typically the easiest because you don't need to be holding on to anything right next to the dog. You don't need to be proximity-wise super close to bonk the dog or leash correction. Hi. Or do a leash correction. You can correct from half a mile, or even if you've got, even if you've got a bigger e-collar, then even further away. So the thing is, guys, everybody struggles with corrections. I think we got cookie and delivery. Everybody struggles with corrections, and a lot of folks tend to gravitate towards verbal. And it's a very human primate kind of thing. Like, let's just lean on our verbal stuff, right? And the worse the dog behaves, the louder we get, the more intense we get. But as far as it being effective, that's not what I recommend, and it's not what I've seen work. So when we correct dogs for whining, for barking, for targeting other dogs, or being reactive, for anything else like that, let me turn this off. There's a consequence that's attached to it. So the verbal lets the dog know that's the thing right there that you just did, I don't like, and then followed up by a consequence. And the consequence has to be something that's uncomfortable enough that your dog goes, I don't want to do that thing anymore. It's really that simple, guys. So if you're uncomfortable sharing consequences that make your dog uncomfortable, then you have to get used to dealing with the behavior that you don't like, because it's never going to go away. If instead you're like, no, I don't want this behavior anymore, and I'm willing to deal with actually sharing consequences with my dog that my dog finds uncomfortable, then you can absolutely transform your dog and push them through any of that stuff. But it's a simple process. Dog does something you don't like, mark it with a no. Doesn't mean scream, doesn't mean lose your marbles, doesn't mean yell. It's just nice, neutral, loud enough for the dog to hear. Once you mark it, you've got plenty of time. There's no 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. You got plenty of time to now share the consequence. Everybody gets all wrapped up in like, okay, I've got 1 second to correct the dog, or he won't know anything about, why I'm correcting him. No. If, say, Archie over there, who's laying on place, was to whine, and we're doing this, and I say, no, and then we pause it, I walk over, give him a little leash correction or give him an e-collar correction, 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds later, perfect. That's all you need. But if you're going to only lean on verbal corrections and hope that they're going to be enough to stop behaviors that your dog is deeply patterned into doing and also probably enjoys doing, you're going to struggle. Anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I was outside for like a while from that, but one thing that comes to my mind is something that I see frequently of like our clients here, or in general people asking you questions, is basically just like a bunch of empty words that don't mean anything to dogs. And so for example, like you can have the dog on place and say quiet and reward, but it still doesn't have the connection of like stop barking at dogs. Like you should totally, if you are up for it, teach the dog place so that he can't like rush up.
Right, teaches calmness and all that stuff. Right.
But then I would even like correct the moment he looks at another dog that's like freaking out, and not just like whens he's barking, because you already missed the moment.
Right.
So your dog needs to be calm and relaxed on place, sees a dog, looks up, and then starts to get intense. Correct for that, so that your dog doesn't even get intense about the situation.
So as the escalation comes up, correction brings the dog back down.
And like my dogs, I told them all what quiet means, but it was no, correction followed up with quiet. So now when I say quiet, they are quiet. But I told them the meaning of quiet, and
that there was a consequence that followed it.
Exactly. I didn't just say quiet, because it doesn't, it's like, imagine you flew to Spain today and people are talking you. like I'm gonna talk to Sean, kochanie, idź proszę kupić zakupy. He doesn't know what I just said because he doesn't understand the words. Just like dogs don't understand what you're asking them to do if there's nothing to grab onto. So you
Right.
can say place 1,000 times and the dog will be like, cool, I heard it, but like,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do with
Yeah.
this information?
And even if you, here's a little addition to that. Even if you teach place, sit, down, quiet, any of that stuff, and you teach it, but there's no consequence connected to not following through or not, or for non-compliance, then you're not going to have anything.
Right.
So you can teach quiet. All people love to teach like leave it, quiet, you know,
Enough.
whatever, you know, all these different things, but they leave out the consequence. And it's just a simple thing. Without it, the dog's like, well, why should I stop? Because I like barking, or I like whining, or I like jumping, or whatever it might be. So keep it simple, guys. If there's something you don't like, here it is about as simple as I can lay it out. If there's something you don't like, make that thing you don't like uncomfortable for your dog so your dog doesn't do it anymore. It's really that simple. But for you to do that, you have to remove the emotional, the heartstrings, the like, my dog's going to be broken, our relationship's going to be broken, my dog's never going to trust me again, all of that stuff. You have to get rid of that. You do it neutral. You don't raise your voice. You don't yell. You don't get upset. You're just like, nope, e-collar, or nope, walk over, leash and prong, or nope, bonker. And those are just three, three things that you can do.
And the only other thing I would like to add is, and it's not so much just for you and your question, but it's for anybody else watching that, because I think that's very important to add, is on-leash meetings for dogs is probably the worst encounter a dog could experience.
Yeah.
If your dog is super friendly and the other dog, someone says they are friendly, but they're not, and then you are caught up in the dog fight, that's a really, really bad thing. And maybe your dog-friendly dog now is a dog-reactive or dog-aggressive dog because of the bad experience. And if you are trying to walk with your dog and he pulls you everywhere because he thinks he can smell, he can go meet dogs, you will never get a nice heel because your dog is constantly just looking for the thing they want. So your heel and your walk doesn't actually matter. And the other thing is, daycare with socializing. For any out there who is trying to socialize their dog to be better with dogs, socializing is not about meeting a ton of dogs. It's meeting very nice, very balanced, very well behaved, very even, nice temperament dogs where the dog can learn and thrive in an environment like that, where the dogs are all, there's no one who's pushing another dog that's too excited, and the other dog gets nervous and things like that. And typically at daycares, people don't know how to read that. They don't separate those dogs. And then you have parks. And then you have the same with dog parks, and then you have this maybe one dog, even if it's 1 out of 20, who is way more shy, gets pushed around by all the other dogs all the time, and then his nervousness gets worse and gets worse. Or you have this dog who's just pushy and not like a bratty dog, who gets to be more bratty and more pushy because it looks cute and fun and he's so happy. Yeah. So that's just for everybody else out there in general, that daycares like that might not be the best option, and neither are on-leash greetings.
I always say our 3 most common causes that were shared or are given to us from clients sitting on the couch that are dropping other dogs off. He was great until we started going to the dog park. Now he's reactive to dogs on walks or dog aggressive. We took him to doggy daycare and he was great, and then he wasn't. And now he's reactive on walks or dog aggressive. Or we did on-leash meetings, and everybody wants their dogs to have lots of friends, and everybody wants their dogs to feel good because we get all of this kind of buzz off of our dogs, like, oh, it's like my little baby's playing with like the other dog in the neighborhood, and like it feels so good. The reality is that if you really watch on-leash dogs meet, yes, you will see some that will do okay. You will see a multitude of dogs that like kind of posture, position around each other, and all of a sudden, scrap, 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 and then the owners kind of giggle and go, oh, sorry, sorry, sorry. What they don't realize is that oh, sorry, sorry, just taught the dog, not the oh, sorry, sorry part, but like them kind of covering it up and kind of laughing it off. What just transpired was that your dog just lost trust in other dogs. And so expect what you get, which is now my dog is dog reactive and possibly dog aggressive. It's really that simple. So
Yep.
I say we move on to the second question because that one was about 3 hours long.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Question number 2.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Question number 2 is from Corey Novak. In case you're up for it, I would love to hear you talk about dog scanning. Is it the right term for the little quick head movements that you pointed out on Lily? I think it was a few days ago, and correcting it. So basically, when dogs are scanning, what does it look like and how would you correct for it?
Marilla, stop. Okay, so scanning's an interesting thing because there are dogs like Lily who have a very, very nervous disposition. And no matter how much you try and get her on the straight and narrow, as far as not just the heel position, but how she walks, as far as her head, as far as what she's looking at, as far as what she's concerned about, as far as what's getting her attention, as far as what's worrying her, things like that. With Lily, you're never going to get her to a spot where the head stops moving around, right? So yes, that is scanning. She's scanning. She's looking for things. If you think about it, what is scanning? I'm looking for trouble. I'm looking for problems. I'm looking for things to be concerned about. So with a dog like Lily, you have to really pick your battles. And this is not just with a dog like Lily, but a lot of dogs like Lily. And so dogs that are exceptionally nervous, I get a lot of questions from a lot of owners who are like, well, my dog's scanning for this, 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 and this. It's like, well, you kind of need to pick your big moments. If you try and correct for every single little tiny thing with a nervous dog, you'll be correcting them constantly. And what are you going to do? You're going to create a neurotic, nervous, overwhelmed dog. So with Lily, basically, I'm looking for the heel position, and then I'm looking for any kind of exaggerated scanning. So she's walking and she's like this, that's going to get a correction. She's walking and she's like this, I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm Lily. Correction. Does that make sense? Right? So it's like you have to start to look for what are the moments that are beneficial to go after, and what are the moments that are going to start to move you in the wrong direction. Because if you've got a nervous, anxious dog like Lily, and you try and like hammer her for every tiny little thing, because a lot of owners and even trainers will get in this obsessive thing of like, okay, she's got to be like right on the money, and I don't want any deviations at all. And a lot of dogs aren't capable, no matter how many trainers say, well, I can get that dog to do that, and I can get the dog to focus, and I can get this. Like, the reality is with dogs, if they're truly nervy, if they're truly anxious, if they're truly edgy, and owners and trainers want to own up to that, then the reality is you have to start making some decisions based upon severity of those reactions. And so for me, like I said, as long as Lily's holding her position, and then any kind of like extreme scanning, she's going to get nailed for that. Any type of like kind of like, it's almost like she can't help it. Like she self-corrects all the time like this. And we've seen it with a multitude of dogs, right? How many dogs have we seen that are like, I shouldn't look at that. Okay, but I can't help it. Now, do you want to correct 4,000 times on the walk? Or do you want to say, okay, I'm going to pick these big moments to where I start to close the parameters of scanning from like, whoo, 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 to like right? This is my version of the dog's head. So you close the parameters to where the head's just moving like this versus some kind of boom, boom, big exaggerated thing. So for me, scanning in that, and so we're talking about one type of dog, scanning in kind of the context with a nervous, anxious, overwhelmed dog is something you have to be careful about because you can absolutely move them in the wrong direction. That said, for a more stable dog, any type of scanning, I go after firm. Any type of scanning that leads to escalation, that leads to reactivity towards dogs, cats, skateboards, bikes, people, what have you, then I'm going to go after that the second it happens. Because with those types of dogs, you're not going to see, right? You're not going to see all this nervous stuff. You're going to see, right? You're going to see an exaggerated scanning, alerting, targeting, high focus kind of situation. And for those dogs, you need to correct, and you need to correct significantly and say, hey, knock that crap off. But for the little ones, I tend to make judgment calls on which ones are valuable enough to correct. But for your dogs that are stable, and there's a big difference, guys, like you guys have to really dive in, which the more you work with dogs, the more clear it should get for you. This dog is here, stability-wise. This dog is here. This dog is here. This dog is here. This dog is absolutely rock solid, can do whatever. It's just being a brat, and it's like, I don't like dogs walking by me, and I'm going to, give them a stink eye. Those dogs need to be held highly accountable, slightly underneath, not cannibal, but accountable. Dogs slightly underneath that, then you want to hold them accountable, but slightly underneath that, and so on, and so on, and so on. And this is not to give dogs a pass. This is not to say that if dogs are scanning and they're kind of weak nerve that you let them go. It's about making smart judgment calls. Where do you decide that it's valuable enough to go after little moments, and where do you decide that going after little moments are counterproductive? And that's really where experience and expertise comes in. And like I said, walking Lily, we don't correct every single moment, because if we did, the walks would be a continuous correction parade, right? And even
Penny?
No, other room.
Leica, Serenity?
Serenity. Even Serenity struggles really hard with like focus, right? So different dog, very different dog. But
yeah, but she hasn't been outside in like forever.
She hasn't been walked a lot in her past, but it doesn't change for me. It doesn't change the fact of how she reacts, right? So she didn't get walked a lot because she was so problematic for owners. But the reality is there's a lot of exaggerated motions and things like that. So then you have to make your decisions. How much am I going to correct to make things move forward, and how much am I going to let go? And those are very, very difficult decisions that come from experience. Anything you want to share with that?
No, but just to like beat a dead horse, I think the most important thing to hold on is you have to come closer.
Yes.
The most important thing to remember out of all this stuff is, imagine two dogs. One is a highly nervous dog about everything, that constantly is like looking, here's a noise, and is making sure is everything okay, and then goes from doing this to locking on and keeps focus. That's the moment you want to interrupt. And then you can have a super solid dog like Murula, one of our dogs. She's just trotting away, sees a cat, no. And that's scanning for like, and then once she sees a cat, she's like looking for them under cars. But it has a very different feel. It's very much with like Lily or other nervous dogs, is very much like they can't help it.
Yeah.
They're just so concerned about everything around them that they constantly have to look. with other stable dogs. And Marula in this example she is looking for cats because now she's aroused and she's looking for like that thing.
Yeah.
So then I have to correct it for that, and it's a very different feeling, and it's very much a choice rather than I can't help myself because there's so much noise in my brain.
Yeah. So it's challenging stuff, but if you start looking at what is the dog capable of, I think that's really kind of the crux of it. What is the dog capable of, and what is the dog not capable of? And you have to be the mad scientist behind the experiment, in the laboratory, and try and figure out what exactly the dog is capable of and not capable of, and then be able to help them navigate.
There is one more thing I wanted to add. Is like the relationship plays a huge role in this whole thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can correct your dog all day for looking at cats or loading on dogs and things like that. But if your relationship is not in the right space, it doesn't matter what you do with the e-collar, it doesn't matter what you do with the prong. It's like we had Penny, another very nervous German Shepherd, go home recently, and she did perfect on her walks, did perfect on the go home sessions. She was one of those dogs where we were like, wow, she has really turned around so much. It was crazy, the difference. And now she's back for boarding, and Penny's mom said that she's starting to react towards cars, relationship stuff. The dad is super on top of the training. He is very much not just a dog lover, but someone who enjoys doing training with the dog.
Yeah, very disciplined.
He's taught her so many things. She knows so much stuff, but he didn't know how to bring her into a calm space and keep her from exploding at things. She would explode at dogs from like 50 feet away, which she doesn't do, but she still reacts towards cars because it's fast motion. It gets her very, very drivey. And so that's relationship stuff. That's not because she doesn't know not to do it, or because she doesn't care about the e-collar corrections, but it's the thing.
Can you explain why the relationship would cause a dog that knows better to make that decision?
Because of the relationship.
Yeah, but what about it? I'm challenging you because it's good for everybody to hear.
So when I see a relationship being problematic, is this kind of example that you want to look at your dog with like glazing eyes and just like we have a deep connection, and it's all very much too much. It's like a very needy boyfriend that never leaves you alone, that you can't get away from, but you both do it to each other. So it's like, yes, I want to be firm with you and hold you accountable, but I love you and I want to pet you. And even if they don't do it physically, the dog still knows there's this little bit of, you don't quite mean it. Dependency. And there's this, dogs know if you mean it or if you don't mean it.
Absolutely.
So even just like before we got Voodoo, and I started getting really strict with one of our dogs, Archie, because he's very, very needy with me and very obsessive about me. So I had to rail all that in and not let him be like that. But every time I said, no, you can't come up for pets, you can't come up for this, you can't be on the bed and things like that, there was no guilty feeling about it. There was no like, I have to do this because we're getting a new puppy and this is really important. It was just like, no, you need to go now.
Yeah.
Because I know that might create friction if you do not see this relationship as that.
And how many owners do you think would be struggling with that dynamic?
Everyone.
So,
without a doubt.
So what she just said is so on point, because that's how you're able to augment, transform relationships, by setting up new rules, new relationship dynamics, accountability, all of this stuff where you really follow through and your dog goes, oh, okay, it's a new thing. And there's no guilt, there's no softness, there's no trepidation, there's no hesitation, there's nothing that gets in the way of like, this is what I mean. And so when Marta interacts with Archie, it's like, enough, off the bed, right? And there's no like, God, I feel so bad.
And please go, you need to go because you can't be on the bed. I say, no, go away. And my dogs actually know what go away means. I'm not just saying
Yeah.
that. They learn
Yeah.
that means move away.
But if you think about it, the way you just said it in the kind of sweeter, like nicer, friendly,
like, oh,
warmer
okay.
way, like if you're a dog and you want to be near you, and then there's another dog around that you feel competition with, man, it's a wide open a battlefield basically, because now you've proven yourself to be, if I'm going to put this in very clear terms, you've proven yourself to be a resource that's up for grabs.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not firm enough, because you're like, okay, Archie, you got to go down, like, off the bed. And Archie's like, well, you don't, like, he's not intellectually thinking it, but he's like, oh, you don't really mean it. And then the other dog comes up and he's like, but this is my lady. And then you get a fight.
Yeah.
Versus a simple shift, which is like, off the bed. I'm not mad at you.
Like,
I'm not, yeah, but I'm not mad at you. I don't love you any less. I just want this rule to be in concrete. And Archie's like, got it. And then the other dog comes up and Archie's like, no problem. You run the show. You make the rules. I got it. We're good.
And just to tie this all back into scanning, if your relationship is very much on point with a nervous dog, you'll get much less of the bigger stuff, meaning the actual like scanning and loading and then exploding.
Yeah.
And maybe just like those head movements without the actual locking on, loading, explosion.
Yeah.
So when you hear Sean write about don't let your dog scan, it's because from scanning comes loading and then all these things.
Escalation sequence, yeah.
Escalation sequence. So that's why it's so important. If you do have a very nervous dog, make sure your relationship is in a good spot so that all those little moments don't matter. Because truly, those little moments don't matter unless your relationship is really bad. Then they do in other contexts. But basically, the relationship stuff is really important as far as the scanning and how your dog perceives you and feels about you, to how much of that stuff they actually do.
I just feel like, as you're saying that, I just feel like it sounds so much like, not to get too far off on this, but like the soft parent and the firm parent. And the soft parent, the kid comes over and he's like, well, what do you think? Is it okay if I do this? And you know,
just like,
and
try it's a bunch of shit. Let me put
yeah,
this, let me take this.
and gets away with it. And the other parent's like, well, what the hell did you let them do? You know, it's just like, kids and dogs, I've said it a million times, are opportunistic, and they're looking to read, how much can I push? Not because they're terrible, horrible creatures, but because they're smart, opportunistic creatures. And if you're going to come across soft, then they're going to take advantage of that to get the things that they want out of life. And just to close this out, guys, I hope you listened to all of that. And I know it was a lot of stuff, but so many of you struggle with relationship dynamics, and you feel bad, you feel sad, you feel guilty, you hesitate, you're tentative, you're half-assed about how you do it. And what do you get? You get a dog who doesn't take you serious. And then so even though you tried to do a little bit of this kind of leadership stuff, you haven't created anything believable enough for your dog to make different decisions with and actually inhibit their poor choices. And so you get their bad choices. And it's really that simple. And if people would just fucking step up and just own their house, own their relationships, and not be afraid of laying down the law without their dogs bursting into flames, they could actually have 1,000 times better relationship with their dogs than what they've got right now. And I know that sounds overly simplistic, but it kind of is.
Two things.
Oh, geez. This is going to be the never-ending question.
This is
We're
going to be
do
one of
two
those.
questions, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
People get so hung up on what you just said. Own your house. Nah. People get so, those are like nice slogans. And they're like, oh yeah, I can own my house. Meanwhile, they still feel guilty. They still feel all this stuff. And it's just like, it just becomes this like beautiful sentence. If you can be the leader, you can like do this stuff. But like, seriously, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't just like listen to the slogan and like feel good about it. Like, those sayings on Facebook that make you feel all butterflies and stuff. It's like they don't mean anything if you actually do something about it.
Talking about my posts?
No, just like I see people posting like, quote of like,
I'm teasing, yeah.
Sometimes if a bridge, one door opens, one door closes, another one opens, it's like, right, stop being sad. Right.
Yeah.
Just like get over it and like find something that's more meaningful.
Yeah, we've heard it a million times.
Yeah. And the second thing is, when you said that thing about the parents, it made me think of like, when I was a girl, I always wanted to steal pickles because I ate so many of them that my mom at some point said no more pickles, so I always tried to like hide them.
Big Daddy?
Big Daddy Pickle.
Yeah.
That's a reference from a store
inside joke.
thing.
Inside joke, sorry.
And so I would go to the shop with my mom and I would be like, can I have this? And like, big puppy eyes, and please, Mom. She would say, no, put it away. We're leaving right now. I would be like, end of the discussion. Meanwhile, I go to like Rouse's or some other place, and this kid, Mom, I want this. And she's like, no, honey, look, I have no more money. You need to put this away. Here, give it to me. I'll put it away. No! Stop giving your dogs and your children options. And like, how is...
It's the leeway to negotiate. And it just, once that door's open, any kid that's worth the salt is going to be like, aha,
and there's
cool, I gotcha.
There's no difference between that and saying, come on, Archie, you need to get off the bed because you and Voodoo need to get along, and saying, get off my bed right now.
Yep. But everybody's so worried about being so tough because everybody's so goddamn soft right now. But somehow we manage to live with all these dogs and have client dogs
many different personalities.
and Shelby's dogs coming in and no problems. Yep. And I'm not like pounding my chest saying like, oh, we're the most amazing. I'm just saying it's like, I think if I asked you if I own this house and run this house, you'd say,
yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, our dogs get to be on the couch. We let them get away with silly stuff that we tell other people not to do, because when we say no, it actually means something. So the little moments don't matter.
They don't. And I've said that with the 10-10 principle and all that stuff. It's like, if you're going to be a 5 in discipline or affection, either way, then they need to balance out. If If you're going to be a 10 in affection, then you better sure as hell be a 10 in discipline. 100%. And if you're not, then you're like this, and you should expect problems because dogs are smart. So we really need to move on from this question.
Right, okay. All right. Question number 3.
Yeah.
Is from Kim. If we just discovered you and it's all new, where does one begin?
Whew. That's a great question, Kim. So we have hundreds of videos.
Hundreds and hundreds.
Okay, so this is a good question. I've had this question a lot. If you go to our website, www.thegooddog.net, and you click on our free how-to videos, that's a great place to start. So they're all put in one spot, and they will walk you through how to fit a prong collar, how to introduce a prong collar, how to start off with a prong collar for all the different commands, then moving into e-collar work and things like that. So that's a great place to start as far as getting the basics of the actual tools and the commands that you're going to be using. But that's only a tiny piece of it. If you really, really, really want to dive deep, the best thing I can recommend, a couple things. So I'd recommend the book. It's right now 50% off. If you see this really quick,
right,
it'll come out Saturday, so you only have one day after this comes out.
No, we're doing Thursday to Thursday.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so if you happen to see this, the audiobook and the ebook are both 50% off. A lot of people have found a ton of value in that book, and it's really helped them put things together. Our prong collar foundational DVD /streaming program a lot of folks have trained their dogs using that. And that's also 50% off. Comes with a full booklet and step-by-step video. And it's like, it costs us a fortune to do, just so everybody knows. It's like, it's pretty high-end, pretty nicely done stuff. Super proud of it. And then we have an e-collar DVD/streaming program. And same thing, we did all, pulled out all the stops and step by step, how to get your dog to do all the different commands, all the way up to off-leash recall. And we even show it within, a couple days span of, these were just rescue dogs we were working with. These are no ringers. We're not saying they're a bunch of Mals and Shepherds. We're just rescue dogs. And next thing you know, they're all off-leash, running around doing their thing. So if you want to pay some bucks, the books, the prong, the e-collar, those are great resources to jump into if you want serious detail and you don't want to monkey around. You're like, I want the best stuff all in one spot. Now, if you're less apt to pay a bunch of dough, not a bunch of dough, but if you're less apt to pay dough for it, and you really want to dive in and do stuff on your own and kind of discover everything, then go to what I said, the how-to videos on the website. And that will walk you through a ton of videos of how to get started. But like I said, the thing that you really want to jump into that I feel kind of ties it all together are the Q&A Saturdays. So the Q&A Saturdays have been going on for years and years and years. And we took a break here and there. But the thing with Q&A Saturdays is that it allows us to dive into very, very detailed aspects of training, whether it's dog reactivity or resource guarding or dog aggression or territorial stuff or what have you. The Q&A Saturdays allow us, as you can see right here, so much time to dive in and really just lay it all out for you. So if I was me, and I knew about all this stuff, but I didn't have all the training information, but I just knew about all this stuff, then I would just dive in and start seeing, okay, what makes sense? What do I need from my dog? Okay, so I want to start, and I would recommend start with prong collar. That's a good foundational space to start, and then move into e-collar as you get yourself into a great space. But along with all that, check out the posts on Facebook and on Instagram. They're all talking about conceptual ideas. They're not just like, hey, look at a cute picture of a dog. They're conceptual ideas that will help you. And the Q&A Saturdays, I mean, they're just hours. It's going to take time. And so it's either you hire a trainer, you pay the money, or you go after, the free material, and you spend a lot of time digging through it and finding out the stuff that works. So it's either like we've got either money and here's all the stuff, or we've got time and we've got a lot of work to do to try and find out what we need. And so that would be my best suggestion.
You forgot about our second how-to things we did, because we started a brand new how-to series on YouTube.
Yeah, but they're in the same spot, right?
No, they're not.
They're not. Where are they?
On YouTube.
But what are they called?
The Good Dogs new...
2.0.
2.0. How-to training 2.0.
Yeah. So if you go to...
and I think personally, I think it's way more detailed than the old videos you had.
Okay. There. So if you go to Instagram and you go to the Good Dog Training and you go to our bio, you will find a whole list of different resources, right? Linktree link. And one of them is
the Good Dogs How-to Training 2.0.
2.0. And so that's the newer stuff. And then we also have a Patreon, as if that wasn't enough. I mean, I'm telling you, people train their dogs all the time without ever seeing us. I get videos and messages all the time from people all across the world that are like, look, my dog's fully off-leash trained and I learned it all from your video. So if you want it, it's out there. It just takes some work. The Patreon is really, really cool because we're diving into all sorts of different, from prong, e-collar, behavior modification, puppy training, conceptual ideas. We run the gamut. And we're constantly adding new videos. I think we have 90 videos on there right now? Something like that. And it's 10.
And a whole puppy training series, which is like you can't find that stuff anywhere.
And it's with 2 different puppies, right?
Yes.
At this point. And it's going to be moving on into e-collar work with
and it's not just how do I train them to do obedience commands, because in all reality, as long as you can have your dog walk nicely, you don't need them to know place or down or any of that stuff. You don't. All you need is a well-behaved dog. So there's much, much more to raising a puppy than teaching them how to sit and lie down. So there's a lot of like, how do we even like do the first day? What do we do with them? A lot of people bring puppies in and are like, here, go and like run around and we're gonna play and have fun.
Right.
And next thing you know is the puppy's chewing up the carpet, peeing everywhere, barking at everything. They don't know what to do. Lock it in the bathroom, tears up the bathroom, off you go to the pound, kind of thing. It's a lot of pound dogs are just ended up just because of that. So it goes in a lot of like, how do I interact with them? How do I raise them? Why is like a certain time of like weeks, age of weeks, so critical? And like all the actual like how to like raise a good puppy.
Yeah. So what Marta's saying is just that our Patreon account has some pretty in-depth puppy work with multiple dogs, and we don't have it really in any other spots on any of our other platforms.
Exclusive.
Yeah, and so for Patreon, it's $10. $10 gives you all access to all the videos, everything we got for 1 month, and you can jump out after a month and be like, okay, I'm done, or you can continue on. We add new videos about, once a week, something like that.
Sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes we add like 3 a day for like 2 weeks. Sometimes it depends on like what kind of dogs we have and what work we can do with them. Like right now we have a dog that needs to be muzzle conditioned, so we can do a how to muzzle condition a dog thing.
Right.
But if we have 5 dogs that basically all have the same problem and are more or less the same kind of temperament, there's only so much we can do without beating a dead horse with videos that like are just not going to be super valuable. So we try to find the most valuable thing and film that. So it truly just depends what we have here right now, as far as what kind of issues we're dealing with and things like that. And of course also time.
Yeah, so I would say if you've got a few bucks to spend, I would go after the prong, the DVD, and the book. That will put you in a very, very good space for learning. If you don't want to spend the bucks, then go to Instagram and go through our link tree, and then start going through all of the 2.0 videos and working through those. And
those
then
are so detailed.
They really are.
Work.
Yes. And
with Mr. Ernie Bird.
Yeah. And then what was I going to say? Patreon, but then the one other thing besides the 2.0 videos, what's the other thing that we have?
I mean, in general, our YouTube is packed with information.
I can't remember, but we have just tons of stuff. So I wish I had a great answer for you, but the answer is really...
I think the book is probably the best way to start if you want to spend the money on, especially since it's 50% sale right now.
Yeah, the digital book, what does that cost for 50% off? It's like nothing.
Like $12 or something.
Yeah, it's like nothing. So just figure out what you wanna get into, what you wanna start with, and if you want to spend any bucks or if you want to go free. And it's all out there, and you just got to dive in and get rolling. And I know it's overwhelming, but man, I would have killed for this stuff back in the day when I was trying to figure out my dogs, because there wasn't anything to be overwhelmed by. There was just a bunch of people not telling you anything. So you're in a very, very good space. So go after, go get it.
The one recommendation I would have as someone who like was in the time where there was YouTube videos from dog trainers is, as you start looking at YouTube videos, and not just ours, if you happen to go and watch the 2.0 how-to series, but any other dog trainers, what I would pay attention to is all the little details people typically don't pay attention to that like make or break the training progress. For example, this is how you put them on place and introduce them to place with a prong collar. Watch the body motion, watch the tone of voice, watch the positioning. All those little things that people typically don't pay attention to are super critical. It's like, it's not just you walk up, you stop, and the dog goes on there. Hooray. It's, oh, the dog is slightly veering to the left. Let me step here.
Right.
Let me make this tone of voice and then change it to this and now go back to that, what it was before. Yeah. It's all those little things that truly like make a difference.
Yeah. So jump in, see what works for you, and then go from there.
Question number 4.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, let's do this. Hello.
Hello.
I have been following your page for a while. I began dog training some years ago as a positive reinforcement trainer for a couple of years and for obvious reasons transitioned out. I stayed in the career field of animals and always kept expanding my knowledge through reading and following other trainers such as yourself, and just recently got back into training dogs and became recertified and now follow a balanced training approach much like your own. Sorry for the long intro, all this to ask. In all of your out videos, I noticed that you give the out command simultaneously with the e-collar stim. I struggle with that word. I guess my question is, what is your reason for doing this? I am trying to further my knowledge, but just having a hard time wrapping my head around the why in this technique. It's my understanding that you teach the dog the command, then if you do not obey, then in this case out command, then you give them the e-collar correction paired with a verbal correction. That way they get a chance, and that way all they associate the correction with the disobedience, not with the command itself. And now obviously what you're doing is working, and you have been doing this way longer than me. I just didn't know if it's just different techniques. If I'm wrong in the way I'm thinking, if this technique only applies to the out, I have been thinking about it more and more and rewatching the videos. Is it more like a working level rather than a correction level, and the working level stim is continuously applied as pressure until out is met, showing that obeying is what gets the release?
Aha! So it sounds like he kind of answered his own question towards the end.
I think it's a lady.
Oh, okay. Lady. So.
Yes.
Who is it?
Barrel Bound Girl 95.
Who?
It's a girl.
Barrel Bound Girl?
Barrel Bound Girl 95.
95. Whew. Okay. Barrel Bound Girl 95. So good question, actually.
Good insight as well.
Yeah. And I think you really did answer your own question. So when I teach, a lot of people teach out differently, and some folks tend to use higher level corrections, and they'll set the dog up around food, around something they're really interested in, and then they'll have a leash on them or a long line, or they'll back tie them. There's a multitude of ways of doing it, and then they'll just say out and tap the button at a high level. So for me, what I prefer to do is, it's really just like all the rest of the training that we do, whether it's sit, down, place, recall, heel. It's really pretty much the same mechanics as far as how we run the e-collar and how we teach the dog. So, like you said, at the second part of your question, dog's on the leash. Dog's got an e-collar on. Dog, at this point, we always make sure that the dogs have got a really solid foundation of e-collar training. Then take a slow feed bowl if food is the issue, and oftentimes it is. Slow feed bowl, great, because the dogs can't scarf through it. You get more repetitions, right? So it's a really good strategy. Bring the dog out, put the slow feed bowl down, and then release the dog. Let the dog get in. And then you say out, simultaneously press and hold the continuous button, and start rolling up and say out again. Is that air conditioning coming on? No, outside.
Upstairs.
So I'm holding the leash, but what I'm not doing is I'm not pulling the dog away, right? So this is critical. The dog's in the food, fully invested. I want this, I want this, I want this. I'm rolling up, out, out. And a lot of people are like, oh my God, you said out more than one time. Yeah, but that's because there's a consequence attached to it. Even if I say it 4, 5, 6 times, the consequence is getting more intense, more intense, more intense, more intense. So, but I've got the leash and maybe the slightest bit of tension, just the slightest bit. It's literally like, put your hand out like this. It's literally like this. It's so light. It's, as I say, it's just to whisper, distraction, distraction, distraction. I don't want the dog like being pulled. I don't want the dog being yanked. I don't want leash corrections. I don't want anything like that. But what I really want is I want to give directionality to the e-collar. So, dog's in the food, num, 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 num. E-collar on continuous. You've got 10 seconds with that. Leash in the hand, tiny bit of pressure. And I'm saying out, I'm rolling up, I'm watching the dog, watching the dog, watching the dog. Maybe a tiny little bit more leash pressure, watching the dog. And this is moving probably a little bit quicker than this. So it's more like out, roll, out, out, out. And typically by this point, the dog's like, starts to move out, and then you guide the dog with the leash, the direction away from the food. And as soon as the dog disengages from the food, off goes the e-collar. You guide the dog away, praise, call the dog towards you. Good, good, good. All right. You can then reward with food if you'd like to do that. Or you can just leave the dog alone. Depends if the dog's dangerous. You may not want to interact or engage with the dog. You may have the dog muzzled if you need to. But a lot of times I will do it without food as far as an exchange. And so then if the dog is super food driven, then I say break. And I bring them back to the food, and they go back in the food, num, 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 num. And then I wait, because here's the thing don't do 5,000 reps, do 3, 4 reps. Right. And give the dog time in between to get invested in the food, so there's some pleasure and enjoyment and reward. If all you do is every time the dog goes into the food bowl, and you're like, out, and you're rolling up, out, the dog quickly learns, okay, you don't want me to eat out of that. Fair enough, I won't do it. And so then you say break, and the dog's like, nothing doing. So you have to be really smart about this. So maybe a few reps. And if you've got a super drivey dog who will like do anything for food, then that's a blessing, because you can do a lot more reps, and they'll just be like, cool. And you'll release them. They're like, I'm back in. But for most dogs, I would say 3 to 4 reps, hang it up, and then do it the next day. So, like you said, it's just like sit, it's just like down, it's just like play. So if I'm doing sit, press the button at a level that the dog cares about, but the dog isn't concerned about. Sit, hold the button, light guidance up with the leash, butt hits the ground, leash pressure goes away, the button goes off, mark it with good, right? That simple. It's the same exact thing without, right? So out, 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 and then the dog moves its head out, backs away a little bit, and then off the button, guide the dog away. Good, 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 good. Come on, all right, that's great. Da, 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 da. Now, to answer the last part of your question, yes, then you do go to a correction level. So at that point, that would be maybe 2, 3, 4 days into it. The dog's doing great. Hopefully you haven't done so many reps that the dog's afraid of the food bowl. And what you do is, and if they are, and if you've done a few too many reps, then get something like Stella and Chewy's, something that's like high value food. Or maybe
even sprinkle it on the floor, so it's not just about the food bowl.
Right, so you can break some superstitions about the food bowl and things like that. Mm-hmm. But for me, I'm pretty happy to just put like some higher value stuff like Stella and Chewy's in there. And so the dogs go, ooh, something good. And so what I'll do is I'll let them get in there. And then what I'm looking to do is now I'm looking to get to the promised land. And so the promised land typically will take me, if I've done a good job prior, and the dog's not a maniac about it, 2 to 3 reps, and it'll be like this. So say I was having to roll up to 14, 15, 17 to get the dog to come out. Now I'll probably be at 20, maybe 25. I'm just putting some numbers out there. I've got the leash still in my hand, dog's eating. I say out and tap, and the dog, boom, pops right out. Good boy, come on, all right. And then you party around with the dog a little bit, get him loosey-goosey, forget about like the whole thing, like, okay, all right, like run around the house, be silly, Then bring him back to the food. And I may even on that second rep, now that I've corrected them for it, I may give them a chance and not correct. I may, without prompting, without doing any e-collar stuff, I may, as they're in the food, let them do their thing, break. They're munching away, and then out. And if they don't, repeat the command, out, with that higher level tap at about like 25, something like that. And then guide the dog out. Good. What typically happens is within a handful of reps, the dog then goes up, especially if you're patient, you give them enough time to kind of like decompress and relax, break, get them back into the food. You know you've reached the promised land when the dog's in the food, you're standing there, and you're like, out, and the dog's like, and moves right out, and there's no e-collar involved. And that's basically how out works. It's really simple. The challenge is reading the dog and making sure you don't do too many reps with the dog that's not super food driven or more nervous, and you don't use exceptionally high levels that are going to cause the dog to be like, you don't want me to eat that? Cool, I won't do that. And then just being super patient and finding levels, like literally, if you press and hold and roll up, you're going to find a level that the dog's going to go, okay, that's enough, right? Now, the one thing I'll add to this is that there are some dogs, even when you're doing, I hate the term working level. Sorry, I know you didn't mean it. I know you didn't mean to make me angry. But I like to think of motivational level. So you might need, instead of pressing and holding at 12, you might get a better effect, because what happens is, say, this is the e-collar, right? And I'm at like 5, out, now I'm at like 9, now I'm at like 12. What ends up happening is you can kind of tune it out if you're the dog, right? Because it's this slow, like frog boiling in the pot, right? Instead, you are at 12 and it's still a motivational level, and you say out and give it a tap, and the dog will back out. And it's not extreme, it's not explosive, it's a very mild thing, but instead of pressing and holding, you're giving a tap. So sometimes you need to change that around, because some dogs will literally just be like, that's okay, you can go ahead, stim me at 15 and press and hold, because I'm going to eat all this as quick as I possibly can. Yeah. So be prepared to kind of like mix and match and be creative with it. And then once you've done enough reps with that, then you move on into corrections. And for the corrections, you look for the levels, the motivational levels that will actually get the dog to move out of the food. And if that takes 2, 3, 4 reps of doing that before the dog actually backs away with no e-collar, great. But do a few reps, and then find that kind of space where you think, I think they're ready, I think he or she is ready, and then say out, and then see if they come out. And if they don't, there's no big deal, because all you do is repeat the command, tap the button. So there's no big loss. So a lot of folks get freaked out that like, well, I'm going to give him the command, he's not going to do it. It doesn't matter. Give the command. Oh, information. He's not patterned enough. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to say it again and tap the button. Ooh, jumps right out. Now do a few more of those, and then you probably won't have to use the e-collar anymore. And you can use the e-collar to kind of come back to and revisit and make sure you keep that pattern strong, but it's not like it's something you'll have to use every single time. Yeah. Cool.
Are you ready for the last question? Question number 5?
Yes.
Boom, high five.
Yeah. What is it? Ka-ching? Okay.
Ka-ching, ka-pow.
You're tanner than I am. This is
I am so tanned.
Want to show me your ankles?
No. Actually, yeah, at my ankles, yes, but not my feet. I have a farmer's tan. All right. Yes, nobody wants to know about more farmer's tan. Okay, last question is from Dalmatian Pals.
Who?
Dalmatian Pals. Pals.
Pals?
Yes.
Like friends, buddies, chums?
Yes. So, best way to train / shape double down when dog already is trained on prong / e-collar for commands like heel, place, down, sit. Thank you. Sending you much love and positivity.
Well, okay. That's a nice way to end.
Right?
Okay,
so
nice. What I like to do for double down is do a ton of downs. I like the dog to be so patterned. The way I look at it is that if you do a ton of downs on place, you can do it on a carpet, but I like it on place. I think you'll have an easier time of it. I think dogs are more apt to do it. So you do it over and over again. What ends up happening is like this: down, down, boom, down, boom, down, boom. And I know I look like a weird kind of like, yes, like I've got some kind of a tick or something. So, but here's the deal, is that you do that enough times and then you say down. So the dog, if you think about it, the dog's been patterned that it's this motion that creates down. Now, when the dog is in that position and you say down again, then the dog's like, but I am down. And you say down at a low level, nothing high. Like if you try and use high levels, you're going to get the dog to move right out of down. So say you're using 9 for down for the regular downs, I would be at like a 3 or a 4. Right?
Yeah, if you're using a 9 as a correction, then go way down, because this is not about correction. This
is like little reminder stuff.
Yeah. So
right?
Imagine you trained place or you trained down with press and hold, and it was at a 3 or was it a 4 or was it a 5. Use that number, whatever you use to teach press and hold, get on place, go into a down for the double down, but instead with a tab.
Right.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And my whole point behind this is that
why is she always sitting on
I don't know. She's sitting on the other dog. But my whole point is that the more you do this pattern, the physiological pattern, down, down, right? The dog is like this. And then so the dog, it's such an interesting thing to think about. The dog is so used to going like this. And then you say down. It's not that big of a jump for the dog to go, okay, I've got to solve this problem. They're asking for a down. I'm in a down. How do I solve this problem? And what you'll see dogs do, you'll see dogs maybe move around a little bit. They'll shimmy.
It's
right?
Like, oh, am I in the wrong?
They'll turn around, like you don't like this position. And some folks are like, oh my God, they're stressed and they're confused. And it's like, trust me, you're using like a 3 or 4 or 5 on the e-collar, they're fine. And it's actually a pretty cool kind of learning experience. You can actually watch dogs learn and problem solve rather than think that they're this kind of like fragile thing that's going to break because they're not 100 million% sure of how to do what you're looking for. So for me, I love it because I love watching dogs be creative, smart, and problem solving. And so they'll be on, I like to do it on place.
Nice and cushy.
And nice and cushy, but another thing, nice and cushy, but there's also a boundary.
Yes.
Right? So that boundary keeps them on it. So what will happen is you're asking for the down, heads up, and they're like, well, okay, let me turn around. So maybe they'll turn a little bit. And this usually is resolved in like 5 minutes. So we're not talking about all day. And so the dog will move this way. And then you'll say down. And you give it a little tap on the button, low level. Dog's like, okay, move this way. Okay, that's not it. Down. And then typically what you'll see within just a handful of reps, the dog will go and lay its head down. Why? Because the entire motion that you've taught the dog, that down is this thing. And so to go the next level, which is actually putting the head all the way down, is a very easy, logical next step for a dog. And it's not like they're intellectually contemplating, like, I wonder if they're down means that now I should put my head down. It's such a simple thing for them to problem solve. Truly, for me, I've been truly amazed to watch how easy it is for them to get it. And some dogs will, turn around, stand up, turn around a few times, do things like that. Don't lose your mind. Don't freak out. Don't be like, oh my God, I broke him. He doesn't know what down is anymore, because so many people watching this are going to be like, well, that's really crappy. Like, you didn't even like lure him into down. You didn't even teach him what like double down means. You didn't all you're doing is correcting him. It's like, yeah. And why don't you give dogs a little more credit than what you're giving them, because you might just be surprised what they're capable of. Now, do that a handful of times at the right levels and just be patient. And say it takes you 10 reps. Down, down. Now, if you're using low levels, the dog's not going to get highly stressed. Use high levels, the dog's going to flip out. Low levels, dog's moving around. What am I going to talk? You might even see them go like, lay their head down for a second, and they come back up. So when their head comes down, good, mark it. Is that what you're looking for? Da, 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 da. Down. Good. And then the dog's like, oh, is that what you're looking for? And then you say it again. Down.
Good.
And then they lay there.
Every time I say good, Billy's wagging her tail.
And then they lay down. And then of course you have to reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it. Now, another strategy. So for your anxious, nervous, frazzled dogs, it's an incredibly valuable protocol. For, I was going to say for your kind of like confident, like happy-go-lucky dogs that don't have any issues, maybe you don't need it, right. But maybe you do. If they don't know how to relax because they're all like...
always just too excited.
Yeah, and kind of like swaggery, then maybe you do need, like the kids come in the house and they're like, I'm going to go like chase the kids, right? Versus, like Penny or something like that, where she's like, oh God, what's going on, right? So you can need it for different reasons. You can need it because one dog is kind of swaggery and confident, like I'll just like go jam and do my own thing. And one dog is really nervous and freaked out. Now, what I want to say is that a lot of folks will ask, well, Sean, Marty, you guys just explained like how to teach a dog a double down without actually teaching the dog the double down first. I think that's something that still is problematic for people.
But it is teaching.
But let me finish. So I think because a lot of folks feel like, well, you should lure with food, or you should use a prong collar, right? I can see the look on your face, right?
I was really hard trying to hide it.
Yeah, you didn't hide it very well. So I don't want to lure with food, because typically what I find is that just creates more excitement and more intensity, and that's absolutely the opposite of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a dog to go to the furthest point of relaxation, and if luring with food is my approach, I'm most likely not going to get it. Will I get the dog to lay its head down? Maybe. Will it stay down? Almost impossible. Like, there's a reason that the e-collar is so valuable for that, because if you think about it, it's a mildly uncomfortable pressure. It's not just a reward. And there's a big fucking difference between, oh, here's the reward for putting my head down and now I come back up. There's a difference between that and like, hey, you need to lay down. It's getting a little hot, getting a little uncomfortable, and the dog goes, okay, cool. And then it goes away. So there's a big value difference there. And then with prong collar, what you'll typically find, if you try and do prong collar head down, you'll get a lot of oppositional reflex. You'll start to pull the dog into a down, and you'll get this kind of stuff. Whereas the e-collar, you've got none of that going on, because you're not even pulling down with the long line or the leash. All you're doing is you're building off the patterning of the physiological down, 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 down. And then when you're on the e-collar, down. And the dog's like, well, I think it's kind of something like this. And then you say it again, they're like, well, maybe it's something like this.
Yeah.
You mark it and you're off to the races.
And if you think about it, like teaching basically dogs, if there's tension, they will pull. That's like with anything. If there's tension on a prong collar, your dog most likely won't care. They might not drag you around anymore, but they still will pull, because dogs, if there's tension, they will pull. So by teaching them prong collar work, you're actually teaching them not to pull, right? But their reflex, especially in a non-moving situation, like with the down, they will still try to pull against it.
You mean resist?
Yeah, because that's their natural thing. That's why you put a harness on a dog and they pull more.
Yeah,
like it's not a big thing,
that's
mysterious thing to figure out.
Yeah.
So trying to put a prong collar on and trying to teach them to go down, you're just gonna fight a way bigger battle than just being like, hey, and then being like, well, I don't know.
Figure it out. And the reason I bring it up is because so many fucking dog trainers are caught up in well, there has to be a protocol that matches something.
Is so complicated.
There has to be a protocol that matches things that I've learned in the past, because we have to go from step A to B to C to D. And it's there are times when having protocols that go A to B to C to D can be very helpful. A lot of times we'll move them all around and we will absolutely mix and match. But when it comes to a double down, if you get caught up in this whole kind of mindset of well, I have to do this other thing first because it's unfair. I've got to do the food work, or I've got to do the prong, or I've got to do whatever. I'm telling you, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're making life so hard on yourself and so hard on your dog. Instead, experiment, try it, be creative, get out of your fucking head, get out of your own way, and get out of all of this kind of indoctrination of this is how it has to be. I can't remember, I don't know if I can remember any time teaching a dog double down that took me more than 5 to 10 minutes and that we couldn't get them to that point. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to think of a dog.
I mean, Penny took longer, but she's a very special case.
Okay, so Penny took longer for you, but that was probably because it was you. But I'm teasing. But my point is, it's so easy to teach, but unless you give it a chance, you'll never find out. Yeah. And you'll never find out that, oh, I can skip steps without it cheating, without it being a shortcut, without it being bad training. I can actually do something that's better training because it's easier for the dog. Because I'm always looking for, I'm going to close it out with this. I do not give a fuck about what the protocols or the blueprints or the older council of dog trainers have to say about what is proper, appropriate, high caliber, high level dog training. I don't give a shit about that. All I care about is I'm working with the dog. What helps that dog get to a better space? And if I can do it in a simpler way that makes it easier for the dog, I'm all about it. I don't care about impressing dog trainers. The only allegiance I have are to the dogs and the dog owners. Dog trainers, I love you guys, but to be honest, you're way down on my list as far as where my allegiance lies. And that's not to be shitty or to diss. It's just that, and I would hope you would say the same thing. I hope that the last thing on your list is oh, I've got to impress other dog trainers. It should be, how do I ensure that the dog succeeds at a high level? Not the level that you go well, I feel like a dog should be able to come around into a heel and then come around to here and then jump onto a fire height. It's does your owner want that? Does your owner need that? Is your owner asking for that? Or are you pushing that on them and pushing them into that? I'm not saying you can't have fun stuff. If owners are into it and they want to do that fun stuff, that's up to them. But what I see over and over and fucking over again are dog trainers whose egos are so wrapped up in how do I complicate something so I can elevate my craft to something that's neurosurgery or, something along those lines. It's neurosurgery, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, well, I think we're both lost.
Yes, no, you're talking about brain surgery.
Yeah. So, brain surgery. It's like it's dog training, and yes, there's nuance. Yes, there's strategic, smart decision making, and yes, there's creative elements involved. But dog trainers work so hard to elevate this craft to something that no one could understand unless you spent 50 years trying to unpack this and put the puzzle pieces together. It's like, yeah, it's challenging, it's interesting, it's fun, but it ain't all of that. And so if dog trainers don't have dog owners and dogs themselves as the highest priority, even if that means a very simplistic program, because that's what your owner wants, and you're like, oh man, like that's like that, I don't want to put my name on that dog, because that's like, I want to put my name on that dog because I want that owner to go, yeah, I worked with Sean and all I wanted was recall and all I wanted was a nice walk, and he gave me exactly what I wanted. Could I give him more? Of course I could, but that's not what the owner wants. So I can tell him that there's other things. I can make him aware, or I can teach him sit and place, and I can teach him how to wait at thresholds a certain way, and I can teach him waiting for food and how to do all this stuff. And if the owner's like, that's great, but I'm really not into that, and the owner makes the decision, their decision.
What you're going to spend your time on.
Yeah.
On the things that they ask for.
Yeah. And just one last thing on that is like, if you're working with any kind of challenging dogs, trying to make fancy obedience happen when, like Marta was saying, which dog was it? Was it Penny that you're working on, that you spent so much time on just calmness exercises?